If I turn back now, someone dies. Emma Whitlock whispered the words into the freezing dark as the forbidden border shimmered 20 feet ahead of her, a pale silver line cutting through the northern woods like the edge of a blade. Behind her, the pines shook with angry voices, lanterns flashing between the trunks, boots breaking through snow, her own pack hunting her as if kindness had become a crime. Her breath came fast and white in the air. Her palms were scratched from branches, her gray dress was torn at the hem, and the little pouch of moonroot pressed against her ribs felt heavier than stone. It was the only thing that could save Ryan Cole, the Alpha's son, the same boy who had once laughed when Emma dropped a serving tray in front of the entire hall, the same boy who had called her a useless Omega with gentle hands and no future. She should have hated him. She should have let the pack face the price of their own cruelty. But when she had seen him lying pale and shaking under the healer's blankets, too young to understand how fear changed people, Emma had only heard her mother's voice from years ago. Mercy is not weakness, sweetheart. It is strength that refuses to become cruel. So she ran. She ran past the kitchens where she had spent most of her life being invisible. She ran past the old well where girls whispered that no alpha would ever choose an omega like her. She ran through 2 miles of black forest and knee-deep snow, chased by people who had never once asked why she was willing to risk everything for someone who had never protected her. Emma, a man shouted behind her. Stop before you cross. She knew that voice. Marcus Hale, the pack enforcer, proud and broad-shouldered, always eager to remind weaker wolves where they belonged. No one returns from the northern king's land. Emma stumbled, caught herself against a frozen birch, and looked ahead. The border was not a fence. It was older than fences, older than pack law, older than the stories whispered to pups at bedtime. A strip of untouched snow glowed beneath the moon, and beyond it waited the Northern Territory, the realm of King Caleb Northwood, the Alpha King no one spoke of casually. They said he was tall enough to make warriors lower their eyes, cold enough to silence a room without raising his voice, and powerful enough that even distant packs paid tribute rather than earn his attention. They said his wolves guarded the border like shadows. They said any trespasser vanished into the snow. Emma pressed one shaking hand over the pouch beneath her cloak. Moonroot. Enough for one dose. Enough to pull a child back from the edge if she could get home before dawn. A second lantern flashed closer. Someone's wolf growled low in the trees. Emma's knees wanted to fold, but something inside her, something quiet and stubborn and bruised, held her upright. She had been called small all her life. Weak, soft, easy to break. But maybe softness was not the same as surrender. Maybe a heart could tremble and still choose courage. She stepped forward. The moment her worn boot touched the silver line, the forest went silent. Not quiet, silent. The wind stopped moving. The wolves behind her stopped breathing. The snow beneath her feet brightened until the whole border shone like moonlight trapped under glass. Emma froze, certain the old magic would throw her back, certain the stories were true, and this was where her foolish mercy ended. Instead, the light climbed around her ankles like mist, cold but not cruel. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then, from somewhere beyond the border, deep in the white darkness of the northern woods, a wolf howled once. It was not a warning. It was an answer. Emma lifted her head, and through the falling snow she saw them. Riders in black cloaks between the trees, silver-eyed wolves at their sides, still as carved stone. At their center sat a man on a massive black horse, broad-shouldered beneath a dark winter coat, his pale face unreadable, his presence so commanding the night itself seemed to lean away from him. King Caleb Northwood had found her at the border, and when his cold eyes locked on Emma's, the glowing line beneath her feet flared brighter, as if the forbidden land had been waiting for her all along. For one breath, Emma forgot the cold, forgot the voices behind her, forgot the reason her heart had been racing through the forest. The man beyond the glowing border did not move, yet everything around him seemed to obey his stillness. The black horse beneath him stood calm in the falling snow, steam rising from its nostrils, while the wolves at his side watched Emma with eyes like winter stars. No one spoke until Marcus Hale broke through the trees behind her with 3 silver pine guards, their lanterns swinging hard, their boots skidding to a stop at the silver line. "Your Majesty," Marcus called, his voice changing so quickly it almost did not sound like him. All the roughness vanished. All the certainty. He lowered his head, but his gaze flicked toward Emma with open warning. That girl belongs to Silverpine Pack. She crossed by mistake. We will take her back and handle this quietly. Emma's fingers tightened around the pouch beneath her cloak. Handle this quietly. That was what they called everything they wanted buried. A locked pantry. A false accusation. A girl no one would believe. She swallowed, feeling the ache in her throat, but she did not step back. King Caleb Northwood's eyes remained on her. Not Marcus, not the guards, not the weapons hanging harmlessly at their sides. On her. Did you cross by mistake? His voice was low, controlled, and colder than the wind, yet it did not strike her like cruelty. It felt like a door opening onto a room where lies could not survive. Emma tried to answer, but her breath caught. She had spent years making her voice small enough not to bother anyone. Years lowering her eyes before betas, alphas, guests, even children who wore better coats than she did. Speaking before a king should have been impossible. But Ryan's face rose in her mind, pale under candlelight, his breathing uneven, his mother holding his hand with silent terror. Emma lifted her chin. No, Your Majesty. I crossed on purpose. A murmur moved through the northern riders. Behind her, Marcus hissed her name like a command. Caleb's expression did not change. Why? Emma pulled the pouch from inside her cloak and held it up with both hands. The little bundle looked foolishly small between two kingdoms, tied with kitchen twine, damp from snow. Moonroot grows on the northern side of the border. A child in my pack is sick. He needs it before sunrise. Marcus stepped forward, stopping just short of the glowing line. She is lying. She was accused of stealing from our stores. She ran because she feared punishment. The word punishment made Emma's shoulders flinch before she could stop herself. Caleb noticed. She saw it in the slight narrowing of his eyes, the way his gloved hands stilled on the reins. The silence that followed felt heavier than the snow gathering on her hair. Is the child yours? Caleb asked. Emma shook her head. No, your brother? No, someone kind to you? The question slipped beneath her ribs. She thought of Ryan laughing with the others when her sleeves were wet from dishwater, of his friends blocking the hallway while she carried laundry, of the way he had once said an Omega like her should be grateful for scraps. Her mouth trembled, but her answer came steady. No, for the first time, something shifted across the king's face. Not warmth, not softness. Something sharper, like a tension turning into understanding. Then why risk my border for him? Emma looked down at the silver light curling around her boots. If she said the wrong thing, perhaps the old magic would finally reject her. Perhaps Marcus would drag her home. Perhaps no one would ever know she had tried. But the truth had been the only thing she owned for a long time, and she would not surrender it now. Because he is still a child, she said quietly. Because fear makes people cruel, but I do not want it to make me cruel too. The words faded into the trees. No one laughed. No one mocked her shaking hands, or her torn dress, or the thinness of her cloak. Even the wolves seemed to listen. Then Caleb dismounted. Snow whispered around his boots as he stepped toward the border, and every northern rider lowered their head. He was taller on the ground, broad and imposing, his black coat moving with the wind like a shadow cut from the night. Emma felt the old instinct to retreat, but the border light rose gently around her, holding her in place like a quiet promise. Caleb stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the silver in his eyes was not gray at all, but something brighter, older, almost lunar. His gaze dropped to the pouch in her hands, then to the faint scratches across her palms. You crossed into a forbidden kingdom, he said. Not for power, not for shelter, not to save yourself. Emma's voice came barely above a whisper. I only need to get back before dawn. Behind her, Marcus gave a short, bitter laugh. She will not be going anywhere except home with us. Caleb finally looked at him, and the air changed. The cold did not grow harsher. It grew absolute. You call it home, the king said, each word calm enough to be terrifying. Yet she ran from it bleeding hope into the snow. Marcus went pale. Emma's heart struck once hard. Caleb turned back to her, and for the first time, his voice lowered into something only she could hear. Tell me your name, little Omega. She should have been afraid of the command, but it did not feel like ownership. It felt like recognition. Emma Whitlock. The glowing border flashed beneath her feet the moment she said it, and every wolf in the northern line lifted its head at once. Emma Whitlock. The moment her name left her mouth, the old boarder answered as if it had been waiting years to hear it. Silver light pulsed beneath the snow, spreading in a perfect circle around her boots, then racing outward through the frozen trees in thin, shining veins. The northern wolves lifted their heads together, not with hunger, not with warning, but with a strange, solemn attention that made Emma's skin prickle beneath her worn cloak. Marcus Hale stepped back so quickly his heel struck a buried root. "That is a trick," he said, but his voice had lost its strength. "She has always been strange. Ask anyone in Silverpine. She hears things, feels things, makes people pity her." Emma kept her hands around the pouch of moonroot because if she let go, she was afraid they would see how badly she was shaking. Strange. That word had followed her since childhood, ever since she had known when a horse was in pain before it limped, ever since she had soothed crying babies before their own mothers understood why they were afraid. Her gift had never looked like power. It did not roar. It did not command. It only noticed suffering and moved toward it. In Silverpine, that made people uncomfortable. In Silverpine, kindness was acceptable only when it stayed useful and quiet. King Caleb Northwood did not look away from the glowing border. His face remained unreadable, but something deep in his expression tightened, as though the land itself had spoken a language only he understood. "The border does not answer lies," he said. Marcus swallowed. "Your Majesty, with respect, old magic can be unstable near Omegas. She could be carrying some sickness, some cursed mark from our territory. Let us remove her before this becomes a royal matter." Emma felt those words like cold water down her back. Remove her. Not help her. Not hear her. Remove her, as if she were a stain on the snow. She drew in a slow breath and looked past Marcus toward the distant trees behind him. Somewhere beyond those dark pines, Ryan Cole was running out of time. The moonroot would only matter if she made it back. The truth would only matter if she was allowed to move. "Please," she said, turning to Caleb. "You can decide what I am after. You can question me after. You can lock me in your strongest room if I have broken your law. But let me take this medicine first." The northern riders exchanged glances. Emma hated the desperation in her voice, but she could not hide it. Pride was for people who had choices. Caleb took one step closer to the border. The silver light did not retreat from him. It rose, curling faintly around the edge of his black coat, recognizing him as surely as it had recognized her. "The boy who needs this," he said. "Is he the one your pack protects?" Emma hesitated. "Yes." "And you are the one they blame?" Her throat tightened. She nodded. For a long second, his silence seemed to stretch across the whole forest. Then he held out his hand, not to take the pouch, not to seize her. Simply open, steady, waiting. "Show me." Emma stared at his hand. No alpha had ever offered her choice so plainly. In Silverpine, hands reached to point, to push aside, to take work from her and give more. But Caleb's hand remained still, gloved in black leather, palm up beneath the moonlight. She placed the pouch there. His fingers closed around it with careful precision, and the moment the moonroot touched him, the pale leaves inside glowed through the cloth. A low sound moved through the wolves. Caleb's eyes shifted back to Emma. "Fresh cut," he said. "Less than 1 hour old." Emma blinked. "Yes. You crossed 3 miles of winter woods to gather it." "About 3.5, she whispered, because some frightened part of her still cared about being accurate. For the briefest instant, one corner of his mouth almost moved, not quite a smile, but something less cold than before. Then Marcus raised his voice again. "Your Majesty, this has gone too far. She is Silverpine property under pack discipline." The light at the border dimmed, then flared so bright the snow around Marcus turned white as noon. Emma flinched, but Caleb did not. Slowly he turned his head. "No living wolf is property in my realm." The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. They settled over the forest like law carved into stone. Marcus lowered his eyes, but anger burned beneath his obedience. Emma saw it and knew this was not over. Men like Marcus did not forgive being corrected in front of witnesses, especially not because of an Omega. Caleb gave the pouch back to Emma. His fingers brushed her palm for only a second, safe and brief, but the border light surged between them like a held breath. Emma gasped softly. Caleb went completely still. His silver eyes sharpened, and for the first time since he had appeared, the king looked almost shaken. From somewhere far beyond the trees, A bell rang once in the northern territory, deep and ancient, rolling across the snow. Every rider bowed their head. Emma looked around, lost and afraid. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Caleb did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on her hand, where the light still lingered against her skin. At last, he said quietly, "It means the border has made you a guest of the crown." Caleb stepped back and signaled to one of his riders. "Saddle her a horse. We ride for Silver Pine." Emma's breath caught. "You are coming with me?" He looked toward the southern trees, where her pack waited in fear and anger, then back at her with eyes cold enough to freeze every lie between them. "You crossed my border to save a child," he said. "Now I will cross yours to see who tried to stop you." The ride back toward Silver Pine felt longer than the 3.5 miles Emma had run alone, not because the forest had changed, but because everything inside her had. She sat on a northern mare with a white mane and a steady gait, wrapped in a thick, dark cloak one of Caleb's riders had placed around her shoulders without a word. It smelled faintly of pine smoke and winter leather, clean and unfamiliar, like a life she had never been allowed to imagine. Caleb rode beside her, silent on his black horse, his posture straight, his eyes fixed ahead. The northern wolves moved through the trees around them without breaking a branch, silver shapes slipping between moonlit trunks, and Emma could feel Marcus and the Silver Pine guards behind them, furious but careful now, forced to follow under the gaze of a king. The pouch of moonroot rested in her lap. She held it with both hands as if warmth alone could keep its magic alive. "He has less than an hour," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Caleb heard anyway. "Then we will arrive before that." It was not comfort, exactly. It was certainty. Emma turned toward him, surprised by how much steadier his words made her feel. "Why do you believe me?" Caleb's gaze remained on the trail. "Because liars usually protect themselves first." The answer settled quietly between them. Emma looked down at her hands, red from cold, fingertips stiff around the cloth. She wanted to tell him that she was not brave, not the way stories made bravery sound. She had been terrified every step through the woods. Terrified when branches snapped behind her. Terrified when the border lit beneath her feet. Terrified even now, because returning to Silver Pine meant facing every eye that had ever decided she was nothing. But maybe Caleb already knew. Maybe he understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going while fear walked beside you. The first lights of Silver Pine appeared through the trees, small yellow squares trembling in the dark. The village should have looked familiar. The cookhouse chimney, the frozen well, the long hall with its antlered roofline. Instead, it looked smaller than Emma remembered, a place built from old rules and whispered judgments. A bell rang from the healer's cabin. Once, twice. Urgent. Emma's breath caught. "Ryan." She urged the mare forward before anyone could stop her. The horse responded at once, carrying her down the snowy lane toward the cabin where half the pack had gathered outside. Faces turned as she arrived. Shock moved through them first, then anger, then something close to fear when Caleb Northwood rode into the lantern light behind her. Conversations died mid-sentence. Shoulders lowered. Even the local alpha, Grant Cole, standing on the healer's porch with his coat thrown over nightclothes, went pale when he recognized the Northern King. Emma slid from the saddle too quickly and nearly lost her balance, but she caught herself and pushed through the crowd. "Move," she said. It came out soft, but no one moved. These were the same wolves who had ordered her to scrub floors, carry water, bow her head, stay quiet. Her voice had never been enough for them. Then Caleb dismounted behind her. His boots touched the snow, and the crowd opened. Emma did not look back. If she did, she might fall apart. Inside the cabin, the air was warm and sharp with herbs. Ryan Cole lay beneath layered quilts, his face pale, his breathing uneven, his mother kneeling beside him with both hands clasped around his. The healer, Mrs. Alder, looked up, exhausted and startled. "Emma." Emma crossed the room and opened the pouch. The moonroot glowed faintly in her palm, silver green and fragile. Mrs. Alder's eyes filled with disbelief. "Where did you get that?" "The northern side," Emma said. Then she looked at him now, small beneath the blankets, frightened even in sleep, and all that bitterness loosened. He was not his worst moment. Neither was she. "Grind it with warm water," Emma told the healer. "Only 3 drops at first. More will overwhelm him." Mrs. Alder did not question her. That alone nearly broke Emma. Within minutes, the medicine touched Ryan's lips. The room held its breath. 1 second passed, then another. Ryan's breathing steadied, the tight lines around his mouth easing as color slowly returned to his cheeks. His mother covered her mouth, tears slipping silently down her face. Someone outside gasped. Emma stepped back, suddenly dizzy with relief. She had done it. She had crossed the border, faced the king, returned under the eyes of both packs, and the child was breathing. But before relief could become peace, Marcus spoke from the doorway. She still broke the law. The room chilled. Emma closed her eyes. Of course. Caleb's voice came from behind her, calm and dangerous in its restraint. Yes, he said. And now we will discuss why an Omega had to break the law because no one else would do what was right. The healer's cabin seemed too small to hold the silence that followed Caleb's words. Firelight flickered over the walls, over shelves of dried herbs and folded linens, over the faces of wolves who had entered expecting to see a guilty Omega, and instead found a child breathing because of her. Emma stood beside the cot with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, trying not to tremble. Ryan's mother, Caroline Cole, still knelt at her son's side, one hand pressed to his forehead, as if afraid the improvement might vanish if she looked away. His fever is falling, Mrs. Alder whispered, almost to herself. I have never seen moonroot work that quickly. Emma lowered her eyes. She knew why it had worked. She had chosen the brightest leaves, the ones growing closest to the old stones. She had felt them hum beneath her fingertips, as if they had wanted to be found. But saying that aloud would only give Marcus another reason to call her strange. Alpha Grant Cole cleared his throat, stepping forward with the stiff dignity of a man trying to recover control of a room he had already lost. Your Majesty, Silver Pine is grateful for your concern, but this is an internal matter. The girl disobeyed direct orders, fled under suspicion, and crossed a royal boundary without permission. Whatever good came of it does not erase the danger she created. Emma's stomach twisted. There it was again, the familiar magic of important men turning cruelty into policy. Caleb did not raise his voice. What suspicion? Grant hesitated. Medical stores were missing, and you had proof she took them? The Alpha's jaw tightened. Around the room, eyes shifted away. Emma knew that look. She had seen it in kitchens, corridors, laundry rooms, every place where people knew the truth but preferred comfort over courage. Marcus stepped in smoothly. She had access. She was seen near the storage room. Omegas are often tempted by things beyond their station. The words landed with a dull ache. Emma wanted to disappear, but Caleb's gaze cut to Marcus. Beyond their station, he repeated. The calm in his voice made the phrase sound uglier than any shout could have. Mrs. Alder suddenly turned from the cot. Her face was pale, but her voice was clear. Emma did not take those supplies. The room shifted. Marcus looked at her sharply. Careful, healer. Mrs. Alder swallowed, then stood taller. I found the missing bottles this evening behind the old tack room, wrapped in a hunting cloak. Not Emma's. A low murmur rolled through the cabin and out onto the porch, where more pack members crowded in the cold. Emma stared at the healer, unable to breathe. Someone had known. Someone had known before she ran. Grant's expression hardened. Why was this not brought to me immediately? Mrs. Alder looked toward Ryan, then toward Caroline. Because your son collapsed before I could. Because everyone was too busy blaming the girl who always has no one standing beside her. Emma felt something warm sting behind her eyes. Not because the words fixed anything. They did not. Years of being small could not be undone in one sentence. But for once, someone had said it where others could hear. Marcus's face tightened. This is sentimental nonsense. She still crossed the border. Caleb stepped closer, and the cabin seemed to grow colder around the edges. Yes, she crossed because your pack failed a child and then tried to stop the only person willing to save him. Grant drew himself up. Silver Pine does not answer to an Omega. No, Caleb said, but it answers to me. The words rolled through the room like distant thunder. Emma looked up before she could stop herself. Caleb stood between her and the doorway now, not touching her, not crowding her, but placing his body where every hostile gaze had to pass through him first. It was such a simple thing, such a devastating thing. No one had ever chosen that place before. From the cot, a small voice stirred. Emma. Everyone turned. Ryan's eyes were half open, confused and wet with fever, but clear enough to know her. Emma moved without thinking, stepping to the side of the bed. I am here. His lower lip trembled. You came back. The question struck harder than any accusation. She nodded. Ryan looked toward his mother, then at the crowd beyond the door, shame beginning to gather in his young face. I was mean to you. Emma's throat tightened. She could have made him say more. She could have let the room watch him carry what he had done. Instead, she brushed a folded cloth near his pillow, giving his small dignity back to him. Rest now, she said softly. You can do better when you are well. Caroline began to cry, silently this time. Even Grant looked away. Caleb watched Emma as if some private question inside him had just found its answer. Then the cabin floor trembled faintly beneath their feet. Not from footsteps, not from wind. The silver mark that had touched Emma's hand at the border glowed again, brighter now, spreading in delicate lines across her palm like moonlight beneath skin. Emma gasped and pulled her hand to her chest. Outside, every northern wolf howled once, low and reverent. Caleb went still. His face, so controlled until now, changed with a flicker of shock he could not hide. Mrs. Alder whispered, That is a crown line mark. Marcus stumbled back from the doorway. Grant's eyes widened. Emma looked at Caleb, frightened by the sudden silence. What is happening to me? Caleb's voice was quiet when he answered, but every wolf in the cabin heard him. The border did not only make you my guest, Emma. It recognized you as something my kingdom has been waiting for. The word waiting moved through Emma like a sound from a dream she had never dared to remember. She stared at the pale lines glowing across her palm, delicate as frost on glass, bright enough to light the healer's cabin with a soft silver sheen. Every face around her had changed. The same wolves who once passed her without seeing her now watched, as if she had become a door opening to something ancient. Emma wanted to hide her hand beneath her cloak, but Caleb's voice stopped her. Do not be afraid of it. She looked up at him. Everyone else is. Everyone else does not understand what it means. His answer was quiet, but it carried the weight of certainty. Mrs. Alder stepped closer, her healer's apron wrinkled and her eyes wide with wonder. The crown line mark was spoken of in the old border records, she said. A sign carried by the one who could pass between divided lands without being claimed by hatred. Marcus let out a sharp breath. Old stories. Nothing more. Caleb turned his head toward him, and Marcus fell silent at once. Emma's fingers curled inward. I am not some chosen person. I scrubbed floors this morning. A crown does not always find people in palaces, Caleb said. Sometimes it finds them where no one thought to look. The words struck something fragile inside her, a place worn thin by years of being overlooked. She did not want to believe them. Belief was dangerous. Belief made falling hurt more. Alpha Grant Cole stepped forward, his face tight with alarm. Your Majesty, with respect, this cannot leave this room. If other packs hear that Silver Pine housed a marked Omega without knowing it, they will think we concealed royal magic. You did conceal her, Caleb said. Not by hiding her body, by burying her worth. The cabin went still. Emma felt the sentence land on every person who had ever looked past her, and for the first time, no one could shrug it away. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. Outside, the snow had begun falling harder, soft against the windows, turning the world beyond the cabin into a blur of white. Ryan stirred on the cot, breathing easier now, his mother whispering thanks over and over into his hair. Emma should have felt relief. Instead, the mark on her palm pulsed again, and a faint ache moved through her chest. Not pain exactly, more like a memory pressing from the inside. Caleb noticed. The border called to you before tonight, did it not? Emma shook her head too quickly. Then she stopped. There had been moments. Standing at the edge of the northern woods while hanging laundry, hearing the wind move in a rhythm that almost sounded like her name. Feeling calmer near the old stones than she ever felt inside the pack house. She had dismissed it as loneliness. I thought it was just the forest, she whispered. Caleb's eyes softened by the smallest measure. It was the oath. Mrs. Alder drew in a breath. The old peace oath between Northwood and Silverpine. Grant looked away, and that told Emma more than words could have. Caleb saw it too. Speak, he ordered. The Alpha's pride fought him, but the king's command left little room. Generations ago, Grant said stiffly, a daughter of Silverpine was promised to the Northern Crown to seal peace. The agreement was broken before the ceremony. The border was raised after that. Emma's pulse slowed. each beat heavy and clear. A daughter of Silverpine, she repeated. Mrs. Alder's eyes filled with sudden grief. Your mother's line came from the old families, Emma. Your grandmother used to say the Whitlock blood remembered the moon. Emma almost laughed because it sounded impossible. Too grand for a girl who owned 2 dresses and slept beside the kitchen stove when winter nights were harsh. But the mark in her palm brightened at the word Whitlock, and Caleb stepped closer as every northern wolf outside lowered its head. Marcus's face twisted with fear. This changes nothing. She is still ours by pack law. Emma flinched at ours, but Caleb's answer came instantly. No, one word. Final as a gate closing. He removed the dark cloak from his shoulders and placed it around Emma again, not as a claim of ownership, but as protection offered before witnesses. The warmth surrounded her, and the mark steadied into a calm glow. Caleb looked at the room, then at the alpha who had allowed her to be shamed, the enforcer who had chased her, the pack that had needed her goodness but never honored it. Until the ancient oath is heard before the northern court, Emma Whitlock leaves under my protection. Emma's breath caught. Leaving Silverpine had once been a secret wish she punished herself for having. Now the path stood open, terrifying and bright. But before she could answer, Marcus stepped toward the door and spoke in a low, bitter voice. If she leaves, Silverpine will call it theft. Caleb's silver eyes turned cold. Then choose your next words carefully, because the border has already chosen hers. Marcus's warning hung in the healer's cabin like smoke that would not clear. For a moment, no one moved. Emma could hear Ryan breathing softly behind her, hear Caroline Cole whispering a prayer of thanks, hear the restless shift of wolves outside as word spread through Silverpine that the Northern King had placed his cloak around the girl they had spent years overlooking. The fabric was heavy on Emma's shoulders, warm enough to make her realize how cold she had been for most of her life. Not just tonight. Always. Cold in crowded rooms. Cold at long tables where no one saved her a seat. Cold beneath the polite smiles of people who accepted her help and denied her dignity. Caleb stood beside her without touching her, yet his presence felt like a wall between her and the old world trying to pull her back. Alpha Grant Cole finally spoke, and his voice had lost some of its certainty. Marcus, stand down. Marcus stared at him. You cannot mean that. Grant looked toward his son, then toward Emma's glowing hand. Shame moved across his face, slow and unfamiliar, as if it had taken this long to find him. I said stand down. The enforcer's jaw tightened, but he stepped back from the door. Emma should have felt safe. Instead, her mark pulsed once, sharp and bright, and every candle flame in the cabin leaned toward the north. Mrs. Alder drew in a breath. It is calling again. Caleb looked at Emma. The oath is not finished. What does it want from me? She whispered. Not from you, he said. With you. Those 2 words made her chest ache. No one had ever spoken of fate, as if she might have a choice inside it. Caleb turned to the doorway. Bring the old ledger. Grant stiffened. That book has not been opened in decades. Then it is overdue. The order passed through the crowd, and minutes later an elderly record keeper entered with a leather-bound volume wrapped in faded blue cloth. He placed it on the healer's table with trembling hands. Dust lifted as Caleb opened it, revealing pages yellowed with age, ink browned by time, and a crest Emma recognized from the old stone markers near the border, a white wolf beneath a crescent moon. Caleb read silently, then his gaze stopped. The room waited. Here, he said. The peace oath was sealed by Alara Whitlock of Silverpine and King Rowan Northwood of the Northern Territory. The vow was broken when Alara disappeared before the final moonrise. Emma's heart turned over. Whitlock. Her name, written in a history no one had ever taught her. Mrs. Alder came closer, her eyes wet. Your mother kept a locket with that same crest. She said it belonged to women who crossed impossible lines. Emma barely heard her. The glowing mark on her palm had begun to change, its silver lines forming the shape of a crescent around her wrist. Caleb's own hand, resting near the ledger, lit with the same pale glow. A murmur broke through the room. Even Marcus went still. Caleb looked down at his hand, then at Emma, and for the first time, the cold king seemed almost human in his wonder. The oath was not erased, he said softly. It waited for both bloodlines to stand together again. Emma's throat tightened. I am not Alara. No, Caleb said. You are the one who chose mercy when hatred would have been easier. The words found her deeper than praise. They touched the hidden place where every insult had been stored, every lonely night, every moment she had wondered if gentleness made her foolish. Suddenly, the cabin door blew open, not violently, but with a rush of clean winter air. Outside, the path toward the forbidden border shimmered in the distance, visible through trees and snow as a silver road only Emma seemed able to fully see. The old ledger's pages turned by themselves until one blank page appeared. At the top, new ink surfaced slowly, letter by letter. Emma Whitlock, bearer of the crossing mark. A gasp moved through Silverpine. Emma stepped back, shaking her head. I do not know how to be that. Caleb closed the ledger with care. Then do not become what they expect. Become what you already are. Outside, northern riders lowered to one knee in the snow. Silverpine wolves watched in stunned silence as the girl they had called weak stood wrapped in the king's cloak, moonlight glowing beneath her skin, the border itself waiting for her answer. Emma looked once at Ryan, alive because she had crossed the line. Then she looked at Caleb, who had crossed back for her. For the first time in her life, she did not lower her eyes. I will go to the northern court, she said. The mark on her wrist flared, and far away, the forbidden border opened like a gate. The road to the northern court opened through the snow as if the forest had been holding its breath for generations. Emma stepped out of the healer's cabin with Caleb's cloak around her shoulders and the crown line mark glowing softly at her wrist, and every Silverpine wolf gathered outside seemed to forget how to speak. The village that had always felt too loud around her was silent now. Lanterns swung in the wind. Snow gathered on rooftops and fence posts. Somewhere behind her, Ryan slept with steady breaths, alive because the girl they had accused had chosen mercy over bitterness. Emma looked at the faces in the crowd and recognized nearly all of them. The baker who gave her burnt loaves and called it generosity. The girls who laughed when her dress was patched at the elbows. The elders who lowered their voices whenever she entered, as if loneliness could be contagious. Their eyes were different now, but the difference did not heal everything. Awe was not the same as apology. Fear was not the same as respect. Alpha Grant Cole stepped forward, his shoulders bowed beneath the weight of witnesses. Emma, he said, and it was the first time she could remember him speaking her name without impatience. Silverpine has wronged you. The words moved through the cold air, fragile and late. Emma waited for anger to rise. It should have. She had earned the right to be angry. But all she felt was a tired ache, and beneath it, something steadier. Yes, she said softly. One simple word, and half the pack looked away. Grant swallowed. What would you ask of us? Emma glanced toward Caleb. He did not answer for her. He only stood near the northern horses, tall and still, giving her the space to choose her own voice. That mattered more than she expected. She turned back to Grant. Do not wait until someone is marked by old magic before you treat them like they matter. The sentence fell gently, but it landed harder than any accusation. Mrs. Alder covered her mouth. Caroline Cole began to cry again, holding Emma's gaze with gratitude and shame tangled together. Even Marcus, standing near the porch with his arms rigid at his sides, had no words ready. Caleb gave a quiet command, and one of his riders brought Emma the white-maned mare. Before she could mount, a small voice called from the cabin doorway. Emma. Ryan stood wrapped in a quilt, pale but awake, supported by his mother and Mrs. Alder. He looked smaller than he ever had in the hall, stripped of pride, stripped of the friends who once made cruelty feel like courage. I am sorry, he said. His voice shook. I was wrong about you. Emma's heart pulled tight. She saw the boy he had been, the boy he might still become if someone taught him better. She nodded once. Then remember this feeling, she said, and use it to protect someone smaller than you. Ryan nodded, tears bright in his eyes. Caleb watched that exchange with a quiet intensity that made the mark on Emma's wrist warm beneath the cloak. She mounted the mare, and the northern riders formed around her, not as guards around a prisoner, but as an honor line around a guest of the crown. When Caleb swung onto his black horse beside her, the path to the border brightened through the trees. Silverpine followed at a distance, drawn by fear, wonder, and the need to see whether the old stories were true. The forbidden border waited beneath the moon, no longer a thin line of warning, but a wide arch of silver light rising between two ancient stone pillars. Emma's breath caught. She had crossed it hours earlier as a fugitive. Now it opened for her like a welcome. Caleb reined in beside her. The court will ask questions, he said. They will test the mark. They may test your courage. Emma looked at the shining gate. I am tired of being tested. His gaze softened in a way so small only she could have seen it. Then let them witness you instead. She turned to him, startled by the quiet faith in his voice. The cold king of the north, feared by every pack around Silverpine, was looking at her as if the world had missed something obvious and he alone had finally seen it. Emma touched the mark at her wrist. What happens when I step through? Caleb held her gaze. The oath will name what we are to each other. The words should have frightened her. Instead, they filled the hollow places fear had left behind. Emma faced the border, lifted her chin, and rode forward. The silver arch lowered around her like moonlight becoming breath. For one heartbeat, everything vanished. The crowd, the horses, the snow, the years of shame. Then Caleb crossed beside her, and the mark on his hand answered hers in the same bright glow. The border bells rang from the northern mountains, one after another, until the night itself seemed to tremble with recognition. In the light between kingdoms, Emma heard the oath speak inside her heart, clear as dawn. Not property, not servant, not forgotten. Chosen. The word chosen filled Emma like warmth returning to hands that had been cold for too long. The silver light faded slowly, leaving the border stones shining beneath the moon, and when the world came back into focus, everything had changed without moving at all. Snow still fell through the pines. Horses still breathed clouds into the night air. Silverpine still stood behind her, silent and stunned, while the northern riders waited ahead with lowered heads. But Emma no longer felt trapped between them. For the first time, the space beneath her feet felt like somewhere she had the right to stand. Caleb dismounted first and turned toward her, offering his hand with the same careful patience he had shown at the border. Not a command, not a claim forced upon her. A choice. Emma placed her hand in his, and the matching marks at their wrists glowed together, soft and steady, like two flames recognizing the same hearth. A ripple moved through the northern wolves. One by one, they knelt in the snow. Emma froze. She had seen wolves kneel to alphas, to elders, to sacred stones during moon rites, but never to someone like her. Never to an omega in a borrowed cloak with torn hems and windburned cheeks. Please, she whispered, overwhelmed. I do not know what to do with this. Caleb's voice came low beside her. You do not need to perform worthiness for people who already witnessed it. She looked at him, and the steadiness in his face almost undid her. He was still the northern king, tall and cold-eyed, shaped by duty and old power. But there was something gentler beneath the frost now, something that had been waiting for the right person to see past the crown. Behind them, Alpha Grant Cole stepped closer to the open border, careful not to cross. Your Majesty, he said, then looked at Emma. Emma, Silverpine will honor the old oath. Emma could hear the fear in his voice, but also the beginning of humility. Not enough to erase the past. Enough, perhaps, to start changing the future. Then honor the Omegas first, she said. Her voice did not shake this time. Not because of marks. Not because of magic. Because no pack survives by crushing the hearts that keep it kind. The words carried over the snow. Several Silverpine Omegas stood at the edge of the crowd, wrapped in thin shawls, eyes wide with a fragile hope Emma knew too well. She saw herself in them, the way they stood half-hidden, already trained to expect less. Her chest tightened. This was bigger than her. Maybe it always had been. Marcus remained near the back of the crowd. His face pale with anger, he could no longer spend freely. Caleb noticed him, but Emma lifted a hand before the king could speak. Let him remember tonight, she said quietly. Some lessons are heavier when no one helps you carry them. Caleb studied her, and something like respect deepened in his eyes. Mercy again. Emma looked toward the healer's cabin in the distance, where a child was sleeping because Mercy had outrun fear. Not weakness, she said. A boundary. At that, the border arch brightened once more, as if the ancient magic approved the difference. Caleb turned to face both packs, his black cloak moving in the wind. When he spoke, his voice carried clear through the trees. By the old oath and by the witness of the border, Emma Whitlock enters the Northern Territory as guest of the crown, bearer of the crossing mark, and my fated mate, if she chooses the bond when her own heart is ready. The last words struck Emma harder than the title before them. if she chooses. Her eyes burned, but she held herself still. All her life, others had chosen her place, her value, her silence. Caleb had just given her the one thing power often forgot to offer: time. She stepped beside him, not behind him, and the northern wolves rose as one. Beyond the open border, the road curved toward dark mountains touched with dawn. The first pale line of sunrise appeared over the treetops, turning the snow gold. Emma looked back once at Silver Pine, at the kitchens where she had disappeared, the paths where she had run afraid, the people who now watched her leave with wonder and regret. Then she faced north. Caleb walked beside her, close enough for warmth, far enough for freedom. And as the border closed gently behind them, Emma understood that destiny had not rescued her because she was broken. It had found her because even broken places can become gates, and the girl they tried to make small had carried a kingdom's future across the snow in her trembling hands.